Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 33rd episode of the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and co-chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz. He also has his own great podcast called The Rational Egoist. You can tune in at least twice a week to watch some super good discussions and sometimes some super good debates. How you doing today, Michael? It's an interesting news day today.
I'm okay. I'm a little distracted, to be perfectly honest with you, but I'm okay.
Why so? Do you need to talk about it, or do you want to leave that?
I can if you want to. I can't get too much into the behind the scenes, but I recently did an interview with my good friend and mentor, the radio host Todd Fineberg. Yeah, he's been off the air for almost a year now. He and I discussed the interview before we did it. I discussed it with his family, and so we did the interview, and I just heard somebody on the radio talking about how I was using him in a bad way. And when people talk like that, I don't know. It irks me. It really shouldn't. Like, I shouldn't let it bother me. But I'm learning. Well, I've been learning for the past 6 years or so. When you put yourself out into the public light, the propensity to be misrepresented, misunderstood, it can be a bit annoying. The thing is, if you want to criticize me based on things that I've actually said or even things I've done in the past, go ahead. But the mind reading about things like that you know nothing about, that is it irks me. Alan Thomas says I gotta have thick skin, and normally I do. Honestly, I don't normally let many things bother me, but this one is personal. You know, like, you're talking about somebody that's a very, very good friend to me, that's been a mentor to me, that wanted to get his voice back out there. You know what I mean?
I listened to quite a bit of that interview, and I thought it was awesome. I thought it showed that you had a deep relationship with the guy. It showed that he's recovering from a very serious brain disorder and that he wants to be productive again. He wants to be a productive member of the community, and you're helping him do that. I thought it was great. And of course, look, once you become you're in the public eye, you're under public scrutiny, and that means you're subject to a lot of insanity. Welcome to my world, my friend.
Yeah.
Where people set up straw men and they claim are you, and then proceed to burn down those straw men. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people on social media that don't, go any further than, the accusations these people make, and they take those accusations as facts in themselves, and they don't investigate. So the bigger your platform, the more crap you're going to get from people. Unfortunately, that's just the way it rolls. Greg Lewis said he missed the beginning of my opening. So I must have. I don't know if he missed it or if I didn't wait long enough for the time for it to pop on the air. I waited 2 or 3 seconds and then came on. So Greg, let me know if it was you or me that did something. So, what's going to be dominating the news today, folks, as it probably should every day, but doesn't, is pornography. You sent me 3 articles about pornography, my friend.
I did. Can I tell you why?
Yes.
Because the first link I sent you, I was unfamiliar with that as a news source. So I wanted to double check the story as much as I could to confirm that it was an accurate depiction of what was going on. So they all basically say the same thing. I just wanted to make sure that I had the story right.
Yes, folks. For those of you who aren't aware, Senator Mike Lee, who is a Republican out of Utah, has introduced the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act, essentially redefining what obscenity is. Now, apparently, according to our great Supreme Court history, obscenity is not protected speech. Now, first of all, I have an issue with that, my friend. Do you have an issue with the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled that obscenity is not protected speech?
I do. The thing is, what they always do, and both sides of the aisle do this, is they bring up the children, right? We have to protect the children. And they do that, obviously, because most people want to protect children, right? But we can't child-proof a country, right? That's the parents' job, to protect the kids. It's not, we have to be a free people. And Ayn Rand put it wonderfully, that by allowing the Supreme Court to define, what isn't science or doesn't have artistic value, you're then implicitly saying that they can define what does. And I very much opposed to it. Like I told you today, I'm pretty much a free speech absolutist. I'm sure that if you could present me with
why do you say
well, the reason I say pretty much is because I'm sure somebody could present me with some scenario where I would say, okay, I think that this should be not allowed. And then we'd end up arguing. I would say, well, that's not what I mean by free speech. So I just
I think it would be the James Valiant thing, which is direct incitement to violence, and you can link that incitement to the actual crime of violence.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree with Jim. I'm just saying that there are people who are out there who will argue that if you're for free speech, then anything goes. And I would just rather not get into arguing about the technicalities of what it means. So I just say pretty much a free speech absolutist.
So yeah, I am a free speech absolutist. So maybe I'm just not as nuanced as you, so I can't say pretty much. But before we get on the page of the libertarians and start advocating for vice, let me just say that we're not advocating for vice. I don't think obscenity is cool. I don't think doing drugs is cool. I don't think excessive drinking is cool. I don't think any vice. I think all vices are anti-life. But since you are a sovereign being, you have a right to either act for your life or against your life. And so long as it doesn't impact other people or harm other people, well, that's what you've decided to do with your life. This concept of obscenity being a crime or criminalized, defined in some way too, which is, first of all, the concept of obscenity, they already acknowledge in the article is so contextual, it's so subjective. What's obscene to one person isn't obscene to another person. It's really super hard to define it. And the last thing you want is a vague, subjective law that depends upon the discretion of the jurist up there determining whether or not you're guilty of a crime. You want objective law that's very explicit, that's easy to define, so that people can wrap their minds around it, and when you're committing a crime, if you are committing a crime. In this case, his Interstate Obscenity Definition Act would effectively criminalize all pornography nationwide by legally redefining what it means to be obscene. Okay, so look, as Michael said, if your kid is watching pornography on the internet, that's not the government's job to police your child. It's your job to police your child. And I'm sure there are apps that you can get that you can actually keep track of what your child is watching or paying attention to on the internet and regulate that yourself. Remember, folks, in a free society, the state doesn't regulate your life. You regulate your life. You are your own moral agent. And if you want your children to grow up with certain values, then it's up to you to make sure that those values are instilled in them in the best possible way you can. So apparently this definition that he's coming up with is so wide and so broad that Cinemax stopped. I don't know if you ever remembered Cinemax. You remember Cinemax? Did you ever watch Cinemax?
Of course. I think I kind of know where you're going with this. And let me just say, like, I don't know about you, but my friends and me, when we were 10, 11, 12 years old, we used to find Playboy magazines or whatever and look at them. Like, I can't imagine the police coming to kick down the door and saying, oh my goodness, we've got kids looking at porn. Now, of course, we shouldn't have been looking at porn when we're 10, 11, whatever, 12. But most of the kids I knew did it. Right?
Well,
they at some point saw it.
Yes, of course. One, they're curious. One, that they're growing. One, they're figuring this stuff out for themselves. That's what happens when hormones are surging through your body and you're going through puberty. These kinds of things excite you. I mean, they make comedies about it, right? It used to be really exciting for kids in the 70s when they would have a National Geographic with a tribal woman with no top on. It was like, oh my God, I'm looking at women's breasts for the first time. But I guess now that could be considered obscene, unless, of course, it has some form of artistic or educational value. So maybe, according to the powers that be, it would pass muster. But once again, it's the legislators, the parasitic political class, attempting to steal your moral agency once again, by defining these broad laws that give them control over your life. If you want to watch Pornhub and that somehow gives you excitement or joy, and you spend money on those sites, that is your problem. It's nobody else's problem. Now, I imagine there could be an interesting case made, of course, for child exploitation and child sex trafficking. These kinds of things, of course, are illegal, and you don't need an extra law defining obscenity in order to capture people who are taking advantage of children who are being sexually exploited. That's just against the law. The moral law and the actual legal system. So apparently this sort of follows along the template of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, which supposedly Trump was not supposed to be, following. He was not the author of it.
He was not, no.
He was not the author of it. We know that, but he also said he's not following that. And I think if our esteemed secretary, Ariana Sneath, is actually listening to this, she could probably call up several instances where there's quite a great deal of similarity between the 2025 project and what Trump is actually trying to achieve.
Importantly, though, this was not Trump. I'm sure he, I'm not saying he would oppose it. It's his little, minion that's doing it, Mike Lee. But this is Mike Lee's bill, along with another Republican that I don't remember. I remember Mike Lee because maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I remember hearing about Mike Lee. He was this great new conservative constitutionalist, and all that has seemed to have gone by the wayside in the wake of Trump, as it has for so many of them who are only concerned with maintaining power, not actually concerned with fixing the country, with protecting liberties, with upholding the Constitution. It's all about kissing their leaders' ring.
Kissing their leaders' ring and establishing dominance in the culture seems to be their primary goal at the moment. Now, do you think there's any room for the government in the internet?
Generally, no. When people ask me these kinds of questions, if I say no, never, and then somebody comes up with some crazy, scenario, it's like the Sam Harris scenario, for instance. Like, I'm opposed to torture. Right? I'm unequivocally opposed to torture. But if you have a situation where a guy has a nuclear bomb, or a guy knows where the nuclear bomb is and it's about to go off and kill 25 million people, we absolutely know the guy has it. Would I support torturing him? And I have a hard time in that situation saying, no, I would just allow that to happen. So you might be able to come up with a scenario, but generally speaking, no, I don't like the government being involved in much of anything, to be perfectly honest with you.
So how could companies in effect police their content, right? I mean, you can go on X right now and you can find a site that just simply says, please don't look here, it's for 18 and over, and see very explicit sex on an open X site that anybody can go on. So how would you be able to police? I mean, that's just the low end of the scale. We're talking, other types of abuses, Darvo tactics, gaslighting people until they commit suicide. Especially this is an issue with young folks, where young kids are telling other kids to kill themselves and they oblige them. I mean, how do you think a capitalist society would deal with this insanity?
Well, let's say you got a 10-year-old kid. Let's use 10. I'm just picking the age arbitrarily because I just want to have a defined age. Where is this child getting their computer, right? So the parents are buying the computer. The parents are the ones setting it up for them. So if you are in a free market society, and I'm sure these things all exist now, I'm just not computer savvy. I'm, boomer adjacent like you, but at least technologically. But you could, they would market their computers, they would market their systems, their sites, their apps, to parents who don't want their children seeing this. And then, of course, the argument comes up, well, what if your kid's at somebody else's house? Well, pay attention to whom your kids are hanging out with. But there's also this, Mark, right? Get over the idea that we're going to rescue every single human being on the planet from all the things that could go wrong in this world. It does not occur. It can't occur. And it's really not even desirable that it does occur. We want people to learn. We want people to face risks, adjust, grow, overcome. We don't want the safe society that people like Mike Lee are promoting.
Yeah, we want to promote as capitalists and as people living in the world anti-fragility, right? We want to promote we want people to get hip to the idea that life is rough and it's bumpy, and you can wrap yourself in bubble wrap, but it's not really going to save you from the bumps and bruises. And those bumps and bruises actually make you a better person. I mean, Nietzsche said, "What does not kill you makes you stronger." Sometimes that's not true, but it's certainly true that struggle and obstacles are what your body and your soul and your mind needs in order to grow, right? Your bones grow stronger by lifting heavy weights. Your heart grows stronger by subjecting it to stress. Working out is essentially putting yourself in extremely uncomfortable situations and learning to live through it. And then finally learning to actually seek it and enjoy it. And that's the kind of population we want to cultivate. Yeah, folks, in a capitalist society, you have to be parents. If you're parents, you can't offshore your duties to the government. You have to take full moral responsibility for your child's upbringing, and that means looking out for them and also helping them to grow and understand that when they've fallen, they can get back up, scrape themselves off, and then and go on with their lives. Yes, there are dangers out there in the world, but the government isn't going to prevent those dangers. You being a vigilant parent and also allowing your child enough freedom to grow, that's what's going to help your child avoid dangers in the future. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, there's a couple articles that go into detail about Mike Lee and his co-conspirator Representative Miller. But I mean, look, this is a terrible law that sets a terrible precedent, and it's something that I hope does not pass because it doesn't bode well for us as a representative republic. If laws like this are passed, it gives the government almost unlimited power to get into your life and criminalize everything you do. I mean, literally, it said Game of Thrones would fall under the category of obscenity by this law, which means Game of Thrones would be criminal. You would be now a criminal watching Game of Thrones. Now, my wife did say after watching the first 8 episodes, this is just pornography. I rather enjoyed it, so I don't know what that says about me, but she wanted to turn it off and didn't want to proceed any further. But hey, that's what you do. You just turn off the show. Okay, you don't need Mike Lee to make a law criminalizing it. So, dude, there's something here that troubles me, and this is from Governor Greg Gianforte from Montana. Now, he made a big old statement, and this has become a real thing. It's not even like it's a possibility, like Mike Lee's thing. He just signed into law HB 401, which bans laboratory-grown meat in the state of Montana. So it said, "I'm proud to defend our way of life and the hardworking Montana ranchers who produce the best beef in the world." In other words, he's proud to protect cronies within his state. He's proud. He has the sacred right of stagnation, whatever the title of Ayn Rand's
divine right of stagnation. Yes, Nathaniel Brandon's article. Yes,
Nathaniel Brandon's the divine right of stagnation. We don't have to move. We don't have to progress. We will continue exactly the way we've been going for the last 100 years. Lab-grown meat, that's scary. This is a terrible move. I'm presuming from a Republican, all right, a so-called free market guy. Who won't allow laboratory meat to compete with farm and ranch-grown meat. In a capitalist society, they would be free to compete with one another and see which one wins. What say you with respect to this terrible bill?
Yeah. These people are just off the cliff with this stuff, and it's always these Republicans because I get the sense. right, from the stuff that I've read, that this is part of wokeism or this is part of globalism. They want you to, eat lab grown meat, or they want you to eat bugs, whatever. If they're going to force somebody to do it, I'm against it. But if people choose to eat bugs or lab grown meat or anything else, well, what the hell do I care? People should be free to do what they want with their bodies. The other day, I got into it with the guy that I'm going to be debating on Sunday night, because he was arguing. Somebody said that people should be able to eat whatever they want, and the guy said, "Yeah, well, what do you say about heroin?" And I told him, the fact that you think this is a dunk is silly, because heroin should be legal, and it's not even close. Like, it's absurd that the government, and again, it goes back to the pornography thing as well. The government's going to protect you. The government's going to make sure you have a great life, or the government's going to make sure your business doesn't go out of business. But the government ultimately can't do that. And I looked to Friendly Harper, our friend Harper's comment up top, or a few back, where he says, "Did my mom let me watch South Park as a middle schooler? No. Did I anyway? Yes. Could she stop me? Probably not." Okay, by the time you're 12 or 13, which are the ages when you're in middle school, it's going to be a lot harder for a parent to stop you. But as you grow, it's also less harmful for you to watch that type of thing, for you to see that type of thing. And if your parents can't stop you, the issue then doesn't become let the government come in and protect you. But with younger kids, then parents certainly should be able to prevent a 9 or 10-year-old from doing this sort of thing. But if they can't, again, the government is not the solution. And no, I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people go to the government to protect them, whether it be from heroin, cocaine, marijuana, fake meat, bugs, whatever. Just let people be free. Let people make their own choices. You don't have to like their choices. Like Mark just said, I don't approve. I'm not out here promoting heroin use, right? I think it's a very bad idea. I also think people have a right to make bad decisions, because if you don't have a right to make bad decisions, you don't have a right to make good decisions.
Indeed. Indeed, yes. There's only a certain amount of control a parent has over another autonomous being, especially one that's curious and growing and can have times alone with friends where they do stuff. I was a kid once. I did those very things too. I defied my parents sometimes. Luckily, my mom was a bit bohemian, so there's a lot of stuff I didn't have to hide from her at all. So there wasn't that added, kick that there is for some kids where they get to, do something bad, because their parents don't know they're doing it. That was never the case in my house. So I've never experienced having to hide anything from my mom. But still, it's irrelevant with respect to whether the state should take over the part of the parent, and whether the state should look after, should police what you do, what you think, the products you consume. None of that is the state's responsibility. You are either a sovereign being or you are not. You are a tool for the state that does what the state wants you to do. And I think you should be a sovereign being, and the state should stand on the sidelines with their guns and protect you from the bad guys. That's it. I think people forget, Michael, that the state is a gun. It's basically a gun, and everything it does with a gun. And so when you point the gun at good people and take their shit or tell them what to do, you're essentially a criminal. When you point the gun at bad guys and stop them from using force against others, you're a police officer, and that's what the government needs to be. Is they need to police bad guys, police fraudsters, and leave the rest of us alone to live our lives as we see fit. But this is not going to happen in the great state of Montana. Now, the ranchers are going to be protected from competition, and you are going to be deprived of trying lab-grown meat. And
I think in Florida, wasn't Ron DeSantis trying to do something similar?
Yeah, they're all afraid of the lab-grown meat, and it's not just about protecting the interests of ranchers in their local areas or farmers in their local areas. I think it's a fear of science, to be honest with you. I think they can't wrap their mind around the fact that a lab-grown chicken that requires no feed, it requires no housing it, that you can't abuse it in any way, is somehow just as nutritious and good for the body as they'll call it Franken meat or something like that, right? Because it's it's grown in a lab. That's not right. We shouldn't grow labs.
Mark, I'm laughing. The reason I'm laughing is because right on cue, right as I was mentioning DeSantis, we have Scott Schiff entering the chat to shill for DeSantis because, of course, if a Republican does it, then it's okay. So Scott says DeSantis did the same ban. It's clearly not libertarian, but in a sense, they're holding the line for those planning forced vegetarianism, the same ones that told us they weren't after light bulbs. Okay, so to protect against the left's tyranny, the right's going to institute their own, and it makes it okay. No, Scott. No, it's not okay. It's not okay for them to ban light bulbs. It's not okay for them to force vegetarianism. And it's not okay to ban lab-grown meat.
I have to agree with my bud, Michael here. You don't fight tyranny with tyranny. I remember Rand being asked a question about affirmative action and asked how it is you wipe out racism with racism. You can't do that, my friend. You have to allow people the choice. And yes, there are people out there who are trying to ban meat, but lab-grown meat is not banning meat. It's actual meat, and supposedly it's equally nutritious, and in some cases it tastes better for some people. So why not have it on the table as an option? And do I want to eat bugs or be confined to eating vegetables my whole life? No, I'm a carnivore. I'm an omnivore. I've tried bugs, actually. Chocolate covered caterpillars when I was a kid, chocolate covered ants. They were actually quite good. Does that mean that I encourage all people to eat bugs as a protein source? Absolutely not. I have no problem with I love animals, but I have no problem with using them as food because our body needs it, and I think it's a very good protein source. So, but why not give people the choice?
Listen, I love Scott tuning in here because Scott is going to provide us with a foil every day. Because just listen to this. He says this is where libertarian becomes cheek turning to the left. Okay, so to uphold our principles, the very principles that lead us to oppose the left, is cheek turning. Scott, There's a difference between a syllogism and a sandwich. Learn it.
Yeah, that's true. And look, I mean, I know he's got this deep, dark conspiratorial thoughts about the lab, the entire purpose of growing lab meat. But it seems like an interesting boom to me. It seems like an interesting form of competition, and it's not about taking meat away from people. It could also, in fact, conserve resources, which capitalism winds up doing. What I find funny about people is that they make capitalism seem like it exploits the environment, it destroys the environment, it makes people poor, when it does precisely the opposite. If you want to keep resources in play, if you want resources that are nearly infinite, you want capitalism. Because once something becomes very expensive, it loses its viability as a resource and creates innovation in other areas. I mean, you think about, or they invent new ways of coming up with getting it. But at all times, you will never run out of that resource. When you think about oil, and in the 1960s, early 1960s, the great Malthusians of the world, the environmentalists of the world, predicted that we were going to be out of oil by 1970. Here we are in 2025 with greater production capacity, greater reserves of oil than we've ever had in the history of civilization, and more demand than we've ever had. And oil, if it weren't for all the price contingencies and taxes and all the regulation and the crazy OPEC stuff and the cartelization of the industries, would be far cheaper today than it was back then. And what did they do when they started not being able to find oil a certain way? They started fracking. They found different ways of discovering oil. They also started discovering new ways of creating energy, thermal energy. Then they started investing in nuclear until that was made illegal in the United States. Now, frankly, if nuclear power was not made illegal 35 to 40 years ago, we would probably be running on nuclear power instead of oil. And you wouldn't have to worry about oil reserves.
I love it. It's a very good topic because I don't think that fossil fuels should be banned, right? I like fossil fuels. I think they're great, but I don't think that solar should be against the law. I just don't think the government should be forcing it down our throat. Same thing with electric vehicles. Make them if you want. If people want them, they'll buy them. Just don't force them down our throats. Allow people to be free and to make their own damn decisions.
Indeed. And they've tried to force electric vehicles down the throats of Californians who, if there's ever a population that's into doing what the establishment wants it to do, it's the Californians. And entire fleets of rental car places bought these electric vehicles en masse, and nobody wants to drive them because nobody wants to add 15 hours to a trip sitting there at a potential station that doesn't work, charging their car for an hour and a half. It may be great for city driving. It's not for long form travel yet. That technology can change, but certainly people should have the right to choose whether or not they want an electric vehicle or not. And also, a solar guy came by our house the other day and said one of the reasons people are turning to solar is because the grid cannot handle all the new Tesla charging stations that are coming online. And that's one of the reasons we're having blackouts and brownouts in California. Why? Because we've turned away from natural gas and nuclear, and we're trying to make the grid exclusively powered by quote unquote renewables, otherwise known as unreliables. And that has made our grid extremely weak. And I said, well, what if things change in California and they start using natural gas again, or God forbid, nuclear? What happens to the solar panels that you've put on my roof now that have to stay there for 25 years? He couldn't really answer that question to my satisfaction, because I think what would have to happen is I'd have to buy them out and at a loss. But anyway, I have to go to my...
I was just going to tell you, but can I tell you something first? I got to tell you something quick from Greg Lewis because it's hilarious. He says, thanks, Chat GPT. So he may have went to Chat GPT, but even if he didn't, whatever, it's funny. It says, what's the difference between a syllogism and a sandwich? You can't eat a syllogism, but both fall apart if the middle is weak.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. All right, Mark. We'll
great.
see you back here tomorrow so we can answer everybody's questions.
Tomorrow I am traveling.
Oh, no. So I'm alone?
You're alone. So you might want to see if the great James Valiant can come with you, or you're alone. You're also going to be alone on Monday and Tuesday because I'm working, and then we'll be back later on Tuesday night.
Next Wednesday, I won't even be around. So we're off next Wednesday altogether.
Okay, so it's good for the people to know this, but just don't forget to hit the like button, folks. Before
the exit. Really?
Yes, hit the like.
The nerve of some people.
The nerve of some people. Yeah, let's get these messages out there in the real world. There's people out there who want to destroy Western civilization, and the capitalists are on the side of Western civilization. So let's give them a boost, folks. All right, man. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.
All right, brother. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, so Western civilization. There's a very important court case today that's being heard by the Supreme Court, and that is about Donald Trump's birthright citizenship executive order, where he's ending birthright citizenship, or he's trying to. I think that it's a very, very unconstitutional executive order. I think the 14th Amendment guarantees birthright citizenship, but that's not really what I want to talk about. What I really want to talk about is immigration as a whole. Now, feel free to disagree with me in the chat if you disagree, or feel free to agree, but either way, hit the like button. Immigration, to me, morally, constitutionally, economically, open immigration is the right thing to do. So what do I mean? Well, morally, let's start there. The initiation of force is evil. It's immoral. Very much so. The only way to stop people from coming into the country is to initiate force against them. If they have not committed a crime, if they are not planning an attack on the United States, if they aren't sick and they're representing a threat in some fashion, we can't just assume people are guilty of something and initiate force to keep them out. That would be immoral. And I think most people would agree to that, but somehow it changes for a lot of people when it's an immigrant. Secondly, Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution outlines Congress's powers. Nowhere in there will you see the right to keep out immigrants. They have the power over naturalization, who becomes a citizen. They do not have authority to stop immigration. Now, states under the Constitution would have the right to stop immigration, to stop immigrants, people from other countries from coming into their states. That's because of the 10th Amendment, and anything not delegated to the federal government is reserved to the people or the states. So the states could do it, but the federal government has no business in the immigration business. Naturalization is in there. The reason that they wanted naturalization in there, and it's a power granted, is because there was concern that if people came to the country and they were here too soon, and I mean, and it was too soon after arriving, they wanted to run for office. They didn't want to get infiltrated by foreign governments sending people to run for office, to work for the government, to get into, positions of power. So they put limits on how long you had to be here before you can run for Senate. You have to be born here to be president. And the federal government has power over naturalization. They do not have power over immigration. Now, economically, immigrants are good for the country. They lead. Now, there's some studies, granted, that show short-term job loss amongst the lowest sectors of the economy, the lowest earners, but long-term, it's growth. Long-term, they're good for the economy. They also take less in welfare benefits than native-born citizens. They also, by the way, have lower crime rates than native-born citizens. So I really don't see a strong argument against open immigration. Now, personally, and I think it would take a constitutional amendment to do, I think if somebody has a contagious disease, infectious disease that they can pass around, I think they could be kept out. If somebody is a known criminal, they could be kept out. Obviously, if somebody is coming from a country with whom we're at war, then that power is in the war power of the federal government. They could keep them out. But I think I would favor a constitutional amendment that says if somebody's carrying an infectious disease or has been convicted of a violent offense, that we could keep them out. But that would take a constitutional amendment. But by and large, open immigration, it's morally right, it's constitutionally right, and it's economically good for the country. So I'm not seeing any objections from the audience. I thought maybe somebody would be furious about this whole thing, but nobody is. Well, I suppose that's a good thing. Now, a friend of mine, I'll change the subject since no one seems to want to comment on this one. A friend of mine yesterday sent me a clip of Ron DeSantis talking about property tax. And Ron DeSantis, and I believe correctly so, says if the government is going to tax your house for the entire time you have it, then you really don't own your house. You are just basically, it's on some kind of a loan where the government just continues to tax you for it. And I think on this one, DeSantis is right. I really think that we need to get to the point where more people are thinking along the lines that DeSantis thought on this one, that it's not the government's home, it's your home. They don't have the right to keep confiscating your income. And, I was talking with that friend this morning and he says, well, I haven't really heard people make this case. And I said, well, the problem is they don't want to give up the government benefits that come along with it. The fixing of the roads or the trash collection or, whatever they do in the town. People don't want to have to privately pay for that. They like the benefits. So that's why they would never ultimately support this kind of thing. A lot of people anyway, but we have to make the case that these types of taxes are wrong. Ultimately, all taxes are immoral. But not only that, we have to be able to demonstrate for people that if we were to get rid of the property tax, if local governments stopped doing things like trash collection, for instance, the private market would do better. You would still get these things. It's like I have sneakers, I have shorts, I have a shirt on, headphones, microphone, all these things. None of them were produced by the government, and somehow I still get them. So I think that we need to make this argument about taxation, that not only is it the moral thing to do, but there is no dichotomy between the moral and the practical, right? The moral is the practical. And Nicole Hingle says, so you pay taxes on your income and property your whole life, and when you die, they take from you again. You got it about right, Nicole. That's precisely what is happening. It's unjust, and it's up to us to do something about it. Now, before I wrap up, does anybody have any questions, anything they would like to say, add to the conversation, maybe a topic you would like to discuss? Let me know, and I'll be happy to do it. All right, we've got nothing. So I want to make a comment on communists, and then I will give the capitalist thought of the day. In my interactions with these Marxists online, I don't know if these folks are liars, if they're dumb, maybe both, if they're mentally ill. I have no clue. I do know that their reasoning process, or at least the reasoning processes that they put forward, is very confused, and it's all just obfuscatory. There's nothing clear about it. It's one of the strangest experiences I've ever had in my life, is dealing with them. So Inna KR says, what if some people don't want to pay for waste collection and just keep their waste? Well, I suppose it's going to depend. Is it their own property? Is the stuff they're keeping on their property emanating beyond their property to the point where it's, really causing odors for the neighbors, or it's risking other people getting sick? Are there animals coming in that are now tearing up the whole neighborhood? So it would depend on the given situation. But this is one of those things I can't imagine. If people right now want to keep their waste, they can keep their waste, right? There's nobody that's forcing you to put your stuff in your garbage can and wheel it up to the curb like I do. That's people choose to, because people generally don't want waste. So I don't think that there is a situation that we would have to worry about. I'm not for making problems. It's like somebody will say to me in regard to immigration, right? Well, what if every citizen from another country decides to come here? Okay, well, what if Martians decide to come here? I mean, I choose to deal with what is actually happening, what is occurring, not outlandish hypotheticals. It doesn't mean hypotheticals are never helpful. Sometimes they are, but let's keep them realistic to some extent, not well, what happens if a trolley is going and it's going to hit one person, but I can divert it, or it's going to hit 5 people, but I can divert it and it's going to hit 1. I'm never going to be faced with that. Rock Chartrand says, is Zionism identity politics? That I don't know, Rock. I don't study Zionism enough to really know the criteria. If all you're saying is that Israel should have a state, if that's what you mean by Zionism, then no, not necessarily. If you end up saying that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, then yeah, I think it is identity politics. Not to say that the opponents of Israel aren't dishonest, and a lot of them are anti-Semites who try to hide behind anti-Zionism. So from what I know about Zionism per se, I don't think so, Rock. I'm not 100% positive, but I do think that it can devolve into identity politics. Friend Harper says, smell is like sound. You can't disturb your neighbors with either of those things. Robert Naser says, not regulations, established law. I agree. Nicole Hingle says, do you think if we do not allow people coming to country to be on social welfare program, immigration would be less? No, I don't. I think, first of all, I think it's very few. The claims that they're coming here and draining the system are wildly overstated. Immigrants come here because they want to work, not because they want to get on welfare. But you have to consider that there may be people that are dissuaded from coming here because of the welfare. If they're smart, they may understand that welfare drags on the economy, that the economy is not granting them the opportunities. They may understand that they're going to be discriminated against because people assume they're on welfare. So you might actually have more people come in if you got rid of the welfare state. Plus, the economy would be so much better that the demand to come here would be higher. Greg Lewis says, Rock, are you broadcasting on more than YouTube, Michael? No, I am not. Let me go up because maybe it wasn't Rock. It was Rock. At 12:42 p.m., he is actually comments right after you, Greg. He where you said check out the hoarder stories. Rock is right below that. And thank goodness he's here. We treasure Rock being here. Race Jacobson says he finished today's thumbnail and it's waiting in my X DMs. Thank you very much, Race. All right, I'm going to wrap this up now. My capitalist thought of the day is individual rights are vital to maintain a free, civilized society. When people have that freedom, they're going to do dangerous things. They're going to do things that you don't like. They're going to put themselves at risk. As long as they aren't violating anyone else's rights, it is none of our business. People need to be free. And with that, don't forget to check out my podcast, The Rational Egoist. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to follow Mark on Twitter. And don't forget to AmericanCapitalistParty.org. Thank you very much. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.